What version of the carnivore diet should you choose? Now, this question might sound simple, but it's actually one of the most important decisions you'll make in regards to the carnivore diet. Choosing the wrong version can completely stop you from seeing the results you want, whether it's losing fat, fixing your digestion, improving your energy, or simply feeling better day to day. Making one simple change to this could very well make all the difference. I've been on the carnivore diet for close to 3 years now, and while most people only try one version, during this time I've tried every version of carnivore you can imagine, and I've also spoken to thousands of people who have also tried many versions themselves. So in today's video, I'm going to break down the 7 most popular versions of the carnivore diet, and help you figure out exactly which one will work best for you so that you can achieve all of your carnivore goals. For each version, we are going to analyze them through 3 angles: the benefits, the downsides, and the specific carnivore goals this version is likely to achieve. The first version of a carnivore diet we're going to look at is the classic, the one most people think about when they hear the word carnivore. The standard version of carnivore. This includes all animal products, meat, eggs, and dairy. If you're starting the carnivore diet and you simply just want to feel better and improve your overall health, this is a great place to start. The best thing about this version of carnivore is the variety it provides you with. Because you can eat any type of meat as well as eggs and all types of dairy, you're much less likely to get bored of what you're eating, and as a result slip off track. As cliche as it sounds, the best diet is the one you actually stick to. Most people are used to eating a lot of different things, so for this reason a standard carnivore diet can be great because it just makes that transition process so much smoother. However, it is time for the bad news. There are a number of potential issues with this version for certain people. Now, before we get into these downsides, I do want to be very clear. Just by starting the standard version of carnivore, you will likely experience so many benefits that I would be here all day if I were to list them all out. All versions of carnivore are great. You'll be far better off even on a standard carnivore diet than you would be on any other diet. But there are some carnivore foods that can cause problems for some people, and I'd be doing a disservice to these people by not pointing out that a different version of a carnivore diet may make a massive positive impact on their life. With that being said, the first potential issue I see with this version is that you are still consuming some foods that can be problematic and inflammatory. The number one culprit for this is actually dairy products. In particular, pasteurized dairy. This is just your regular store-bought milk or cheese. Pasteurized dairy is dairy that has been put through a process called pasteurization, which is where they heat dairy to high temperatures. The rationale for this is that it kills bacteria so it stays shelf stable for longer. Now, there are a number of mechanisms at play in regards to why pasteurized dairy can be problematic, but the main mechanism behind this is that the proteins in dairy are very heat sensitive. So what happens is that the heat during this pasteurization process actually denatures the dairy proteins. What this means is that the structure of these proteins change. Inside dairy proteins, there is a specific part of them known as epitopes. These are normally hidden inside of the protein structure and are therefore never detected or targeted by our immune systems under normal conditions. But under the heat of pasteurization, they become exposed. These are the specific parts of a protein that the immune system recognizes and targets as potential threats. So when we consume pasteurized dairy, our body's like, whoa, what is this? It now sees it as something foreign, and as a result you get an inflammatory response. This for me is what caused me to have a lot of acne for my first year or so on carnivore. I was out there downing milk like I was a Mongol en route to conquer Asia, and as a result I had terrible acne. And there are a lot of people who experience similar issues from pasteurized dairy. Raw dairy is a lot better in regards to causing inflammation, however it can still cause problems for some people. A key reason for this is that around 65% of people do not have a genetic mutation called lactase persistence, which means they are incapable of properly breaking down the primary sugar in dairy, and as a result it causes them digestive issues such as bloating, gas, and inflammation. The other issue I see with the standard version of a carnivore diet is the cravings you can potentially get from it. For some people who are super prone to cravings, by still eating sweet dairy items like milk or yogurt, you essentially keep reminding your brain how much dopamine it gets from a sweet taste. As a result, your brain never gets a chance to forget this, and it prevents those cravings from going away. As a whole, there are many people who do incredible on a traditional carnivore diet. It's still a great option. I ate that way for a very long time and still felt incredible. But there is definitely a fair percentage of people, like myself, who will do a lot better on another version of carnivore, such as this next version, which is a dairy-free version of carnivore. This is exactly as the name suggests, a carnivore diet that includes all meats as well as eggs, but without the dairy. Very creatively named. A great benefit of this version is that it eliminates all of the issues caused by dairy that we just looked at. On top of this, it's great for fat loss. On carnivore, it is recommended that you eat till satiety, eat till you're full. This allows you to feel your absolute best. But the problem with dairy is that it's very high in energy, but it doesn't fill you up very much. Body fat is simply stored energy. So when you're not consuming lots of energy, your body draws from its own fat and uses that as energy. As a result, you lose body fat. But when you're consuming these very high energy dairy products that don't fill you up very much, you end up consuming a lot of total energy. And your body no longer needs to draw from its own body fat, which slows down this fat loss process. Funnily enough, this is the entire purpose of dairy from a survival perspective. Without exception, dairy is created by a species for growth. Specifically, dairy is made by a species for the growth of its own infant. And as we've heard Dr. Ken Berry say many times, we adults have stopped growing up, so we can only go wide. I think that was a seriously poor effort of Dr. Berry's accent. I feel like it almost borders on offensive. I do apologize, Dr. Berry, but you get his point. Now, I'm not saying you need to cut out dairy completely to lose weight on carnivore. That is obviously not the case. Many people consume dairy and are super lean in doing so. But if you are someone who is doing carnivore primarily to lose weight, this is definitely something to keep in mind. I'm a massive fan of this version of carnivore. You'd be amazed at how many people switch from a regular version of carnivore diet to a dairy-free version. They change nothing else, and then they see the pounds just fall off. Or they see some other great benefit, such as their acne clears, like in my case, or their autoimmune condition goes away. Maybe they even have more energy. For example, one of my clients, Andrew, had been on carnivore for many years. He'd come down from 160 kilo into the high 80s. Now, in the last year, he'd stopped losing weight. But when we started working together, we changed nothing else about his carnivore diet except eliminate dairy. And he went from 89.3 kilograms to 80.3 kilos in under 2 months. And you'd be amazed at how many times I've seen that exact same situation play out. The only negative thing I can see with this version of the carnivore diet is that, well, you can't consume dairy. And I mean, who doesn't love dairy? As a whole, however, a dairy-free version of carnivore is much less likely to cause you any issues in comparison to a standard carnivore diet. So if you are noticing issues or have a plateau in fat loss, even despite being on a carnivore diet for a while, a dairy-free option is a great next step. The next version we're going to look at is Ken Berry's beef, butter, bacon, and eggs. Are there any guesses as to what this version consists of? Yep, you've nailed it. Beef, butter, bacon, and eggs. What I will say is anecdotally, this version of carnivore diet for some reason makes me feel super powerful. I can't provide a great scientific reason as to why, but for some reason whenever I eat this way I just feel great. One thing I do really like about this version is that the only dairy you're consuming is butter. Because butter's not sweet, you're likely not going to have the same cravings you may get from, say, drinking milk or having some yogurt. Butter is a lot less likely to cause any other issues also, as it has minimal protein and sugar compared to other types of dairy, which, as we talked about earlier, those are the two most problematic aspects of dairy. So many people find they can tolerate butter, even if they can't tolerate other dairy products like milk or yogurt. An underrated benefit of this version is that it makes things very simple. You don't have to think about what you can eat next. When you get hungry, you get some beef, butter, bacon, eggs, and you're sorted. This is one of the most popular versions of the carnivore diet when starting out, and I think in large part it's for that reason. It's just so simple. However, there are a couple of things you do need to think about if you're doing BB&E, that if you don't, it can make this version problematic. The first is the quality of bacon you're buying. For probably 90% of the bacons you'll find in your supermarket, if you turn over the packet, what you'll find will horrify you. They're filled with countless ingredients. Sometimes I find bacons that are only 70 to 80% pork, meaning that 20 to 30% of what's in that packet isn't actually bacon. Because of this, it's certainly a good idea to be very careful when selecting which bacon you buy. The second potential issue is that you're still consuming bacon and eggs. These are actually two carnivore foods that some people do seem to react to. We'll get into why this is the case very shortly. As a whole though, BB&E is a great option. If you're someone who is just starting out, I actually think this may be the very best version of carnivore. You still get variety, you're much less likely to trigger any cravings than say with a standard version of a carnivore diet. And I mean, who doesn't enjoy eating beef, butter, bacon, and eggs? The next version of a carnivore diet we're going to look at is the Lion diet. This version is sometimes referred to as carnivore on steroids. And by sometimes, I mean I called it that once in a video a while back and the comments got behind it. You the people, you seem to love that name for it. I've never heard anyone else call it that, but hey, that's what we're running with. Anyways, the Lion diet, it gets this name for good reason, as you'll soon see. The Lion diet is where you only consume ruminant meat. This includes meat such as beef, lamb, mutton, and goat meat to name a few. Now you might be wondering, what makes this version of carnivore where you're only consuming ruminant meat so great? Well, a ruminant animal is an animal that has an incredibly complex digestive system. They actually have stomachs with 4 different chambers. This makes them highly effective at fermenting and breaking down whatever they eat. So regardless as to what they're fed, It's broken down very effectively, and their meat remains, for lack of a better word, very pure. It's free from toxins. This is very different from other types of meat such as chicken or pork, as this is meat that comes from what is known as a monogastric animal. Instead of having a complex 4-chambered stomach like ruminants, monogastric animals only have a very simple digestive system with a single compartmented stomach. Because of this, they often can't effectively break down what they are fed. So essentially, what they eat can actually end up in their flesh. This causes some people to react poorly to them. For example, in some plants such as wheat, oats, and corn, there is a type of defense compound that is problematic to many people called lectins. Lectins work by binding to carbohydrates on the surface of cells in the gut lining, which can then irritate or damage the intestinal wall and trigger an immune response. Interestingly, when a ruminant animal such as a cow eats plants containing lectins, there are no traces of it in their meat. This is because their complex digestive system is able to neutralize them. But when a monogastric animal consumes lectins, their simpler digestive system can't fully break them down. This allows some of these compounds to pass through into their tissues, which is why analysis of meat from monogastric animals has been seen to contain these lectins. The fact that monogastric animals as a whole do not have the best digestive capability is why pork, chicken, and even eggs, because obviously they come from a monogastric animal, do seem to cause problems for some people. Some people are just super sensitive to essentially everything. So for individuals like this, eating exclusively meat from ruminant animals like you do on a lion diet can be incredibly beneficial. I do want to highly emphasize, however, that most people do not need to worry about this. For the vast majority of people, I'm talking 99+% of the population, you can eat other types of meat without issues. I only mention this because for a small subset of the population, the lion diet is essential. In ruminant meat, you can get every single nutrient you need in the perfect quantities. The only drawback I can see with the lion diet is that it lacks variety. Like we talked about at the start, the best diet is the one you can stick to. If you're used to eating lots of different things, and then you switch to eating the same thing every meal, it can be difficult to adhere to. I would recommend the lion diet to people who are super sensitive to the foods they eat, and for anyone dealing with a serious condition such as an autoimmune disease, or for people with persisting skin issues. If you are someone who's super desperate to heal from some sort of condition, I highly recommend giving it a go, especially if you've been on another version of carnivore for a while and still haven't resolved everything you hoped to. I did the lion diet for a while and I felt incredible. The only reason I'm still not on it is because I love eggs and enjoy having them with my steak or ground beef. Okay, so now we've been over the 4 main versions of strict carnivore. But I understand that not everyone wants to be a completely strict carnivore forever. So I'm quickly going to cover the 3 main versions of carnivore that aren't 100% strict, but some people still consider carnivore. Firstly, we have animal-based. This is a regular carnivore diet with usually some form of carbohydrate added, typically in the form of fruit or honey. Well, in theory, a small amount of fruit. The main guy who advocates for this version of a diet at this point is fruit-based and has like 10 servings of fruit per day. But most people consider animal-based to be animal-based with a few other things added. The good thing about this diet is the exact same thing that's also the bad version about this diet. You get to eat fruit, and fruit objectively is tasty. However, the sugar content in fruit can cause major issues for some people. The crazy thing is, the only reason fruit tastes so good in the first place is due to human manipulation. Through processes called crossbreeding and selective breeding, humans have manipulated fruit to the point that it is completely unrecognizable from its original form. A banana used to be small, filled with large, hard seeds, and barely sweet, but now it's soft, seedless, and packed with sugar. Watermelon used to be pale, bitter, and mostly rind, but now it's bright red, juicy, and entirely sweet. In fact, modern watermelons are estimated to be around 20 times bigger and 20 times sweeter than they would be in nature, which means that a modern watermelon contains as much as 400 times more sugar than it did when it was, quote, natural. The issue with this is that human physiology is not used to this much sugar, and therefore it's not equipped to deal with this much sugar, so it can cause a number of issues. For one, this very high amount of sugar can trigger cravings like we talked about earlier. Another thing fruit can do is increase your appetite and make you feel as a whole a lot hungrier. When you consume this high amount of sugar, you get large blood sugar spikes. What happens when your blood sugar rapidly elevates is that it can crash back down below baseline. When this happens, you become something known as hyperglycemic, which essentially means your blood sugar is too low, so your body assumes it's run out of stored fat and it panics to get some food before you starve to death. You know that sensation when you're just absolutely starving? You're in a terrible mood and all you can do is think about food. Yeah, well, that sensation right there, it's caused by your blood sugar crashing below baseline, which modern fruit, because it's so sweet and gives you that rapid rise in blood sugar, can cause. But perhaps the biggest issue with fruit is fructose, This is one of the primary sugars in fruit. It's a very reactive and sticky sugar. Now you might be wondering, why does this matter? Well, when you have excess of any sugar in your bloodstream, like you would if you were to consume some sugary piece of fruit, what happens is this sugar actually gets trapped out by your cells, who are already full, and therefore the sugar, it stays in your bloodstream. So what happens is this sugar with nowhere to go actually starts sticking to the outside of our cells, and this process is highly inflammatory. This process is typically referred to as glycation. But the reactiveness of fructose makes this much worse than any other type of sugar. Because fructose is very reactive, fructose is actually 7 to 11 times more glycating than just regular old sugar in the form of glucose. So fructose is a very damaging type of sugar. An argument that's made in favor of fruit is that it's the best part of a plant you can eat because it's the least defended part of the plant. Now, this may be true, but there are still plenty of defense compounds found in fruit, which could also potentially cause issues for some people. Now, do I think a bit of fruit here and there is the absolute worst thing in the world? Of course not. If you want to include some fruit on your carnivore diet, and it doesn't seem to cause you any problems, then by all means, it's not the worst thing that you could consume. I'm not dogmatic with this, you can do whatever you like, doesn't bother me. But what I will say is that for the reasons we just looked at, I do think you will be better off without consuming it. What you often see with people who add fruit back in is that a single piece of fruit here and there very quickly turns into a lot of fruit. And when you're having very high quantities of fruit, that is certainly not something that's good for you. Anyway, the next version of carnivore we're going to discuss is someone who is basically carnivore, but on occasion goes to the new Italian restaurant that just opened up the road and, I don't know, gets some pasta, pizza, whatever. So basically someone who eats carnivore 80 to 90% of the time, but has the odd cheat meal. Now, the good thing about this version of carnivore is that you get a bit of variety and you can eat other foods that do objectively taste nice. It's also very social too, but in saying that, if you really want to stay carnivore, you can do so at basically any restaurant. What I do think is a great idea, however, is if you are someone who wants to eat this way, try doing at least 50 days of one of the strict versions of carnivore first. What often happens, what I personally found, is that you start feeling so good without the processed junk that you start to just not want to eat it. You see all of that food very differently once you have that clear contrast with how you feel when you don't eat it versus when you do eat it. In regards to downsides with this version, I don't really think we need to get into them. We all know that these cheat foods are going to cause inflammation, weight gain, cravings, etc. Basically, every human health issue is caused by an improper diet. We know this, you're not eating them for health reasons, we don't need to get into them. But I do understand some people don't want to be fully carnivore forever, which I mean, hey, fair enough. For me personally, I don't really enjoy eating non-carnivore foods anymore because I just tangibly notice I feel much better without them and I don't crave them either. But hey, this version can be good for some people simply because it's more sustainable to them. Now, in regards to who I recommend this for, obviously it goes without saying it's certainly not ideal to be doing this version of carnivore if you're trying to heal from some sort of serious condition. If you have an autoimmune condition, a mood disorder, type 2 diabetes, etc., even going off carnivore just once could have a serious effect on you. As a whole, I wouldn't recommend a version of carnivore that has cheat meals to anyone. But if you are someone who just doesn't want to do carnivore forever for whatever reason, then I highly recommend at least getting healthy first before trying this 80 to 90% version of carnivore, and to be very wary of the cravings that these foods can cause. As a whole, not the best version, but I understand why some people want to do it. The final version we're going to look at is Ketovore. This is basically carnivore with low carbohydrate plants such as avocados, vegetables, and seasonings. A benefit of this version of carnivore is again the increased variety. One thing I will say is that I notice when a lot of people get sick of meat on carnivore, they are often eating it with spices or seasonings, and their bodies start to reject the plant toxins from these spices. Spices are actually very defended, that's why they're very bitter if you eat them alone. But because they're used to having these spices with their meat, their bodies start to associate these toxins with the meat also, and as a result they don't want to eat any more meat and they get sick of it. So that right there is definitely something to consider if you are seasoning your meat and you're noticing you're getting sick of it. And then in regards to eating vegetables, etc., again, they are plants, so they will contain toxins. All plants do. Some people cannot tolerate these one little bit, and the human digestive system is simply not equipped to break down plants. We have a very poor ability to ferment plants, nor do we have the enzymes that other species do. So again, if you are someone trying to heal from something, these can certainly cause you problems. Okay, so now you know the pros and cons of each version of a carnivore diet, which leaves just one step: choosing which version is best for you. If you're trying to optimize for a specific goal, here's what I recommend. If you just want better overall health, more energy, improved focus, and just a super easy place to start with lots of variety, a regular carnivore diet that includes all animal products is a great place to start. If your goal is weight loss, to beat a food addiction, or to improve some sort of inflammatory condition such as skin issues, I recommend a dairy-free version or beef, butter, bacon, eggs. Then if you have a very serious condition such as an autoimmune disease, or if you have tried the other versions of carnivore and still have any persisting issue, I would recommend you try the Lion diet. If you ask someone who doesn't want to be 100% strict carnivore their entire life because they simply want to eat other foods, I would highly recommend doing the 50 days on a strict version of a carnivore diet first. That way, if you do eat other things, you can slowly reintroduce them and see how you feel with them. What I think many people will find in doing this is that you feel so good you don't even want to eat other things. That's what happened to me 2.5 years later, and I eat meat and eggs every single meal simply because whenever I get hungry, that's all I want to eat. If you're wondering what I typically eat in a day, here is a full day of eating video I filmed with Steak and Butter Girl. Anyway, as always, great speaking with you. See you next time.